All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I'm your host, Damon Pistolka. With me today, I've got Dr. Alexandria Rosa, and we are going to be talking about holistic wellness for leaders. Dr. Alexandria, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Hello, hello. Thank you.
Yes, well, it's awesome because let's just start. I'll just let you start with your background because I won't go off into my personal opinions on the healthcare systems in the United States, but I will let you start with your background so you can tell us from a little bit better position of why you're doing what you're doing.
Sure. Sure. So I'm in Ohio, and all of my experience has been in Ohio dealing with healthcare and the healthcare system. And I've actually it's been like over 2 decades, over 20 years of being in this healthcare field. And I started off as a nurse aide way back. And then from being a nurse aide, I got my LPN degree, and then I was an LPN for a while, got my RN, got my associates, got my bachelor's, and then went and got my doctorate. So I have my doctorate in nursing practice now. And I've worked over all those years, I've worked in every healthcare setting that there is, long-term, acute, hospital, home, hospice. Um, the only thing I really haven't done is like pediatric or OB, like labor and delivery. I never got into that area, but everything else is what I've done. And the last 9 years, when I was working at the bedside, I did all cardiac ICU. So that's all that I did for the last 9 years. And the last couple years of that, I transitioned from working for one hospital system to doing travel nursing. So then I got to see multiple hospital systems. So I was
Mm-hmm.
working as a travel nurse, and kind of in between doing the cardiac ICU and working full time, I was going to school, obviously finishing my doctorate, but I also was teaching. So I'm a nursing professor as well. So I teach RN students, and I was teaching clinicals and teaching classes during that time while I was still working at the bedside. And now I've kind of transitioned into teaching full time and having my own practice now full time. So it's been I'm glad that I've kind of gone this direction now, because I saw that kind of my time was coming to an end working at the bedside and doing what I was doing, and I knew there was a new phase, a new beginning to be had.
Mm-hmm. So as you were, because you really have, I mean, you worked in many different as in the nursing all the way from starting as an LPN to a doctor, a doctor in nursing. What were some of the things that you learned along the way about healthcare, about what you saw with patients coming in, and some things that stood out in your mind?
Yeah, so actually one of the biggest things, and I actually just made a live stream about this the other day, was I kept thinking about all the frequent flyers that we would have, that I would see in the ICU, the same patients that would come in over and over again. And I kept thinking, and I'm like, when you go to the ICU, you're in pretty bad shape. Like, you're pretty messed up if you're coming up there. And so
Mm-hmm.
I kept thinking, when is like enough for these patients? Like, when is enough? And when are they going to learn not to stop doing what they're doing to end up here in the ICU? Because so much of it was high blood pressure, hypertensive emergency, diabetes, their sugar's too high or their sugar got too low. Like shit like that was what I was seeing. Or they're massively overweight and they had a heart attack and they needed stents or a cardiac cath. Like all this stuff just again and again, over and over. And I kept thinking, when are they going to learn? When are they going to learn? Like, what's going to have to happen to them that they learn? And finally, I figured out that it wasn't anything that I was going to do in my 12 hours of seeing them, because
Mm-hmm.
I go so much deeper than that. The problem goes
Mm-hmm.
so much into like the relationship with their own healthcare provider, with what they're doing at home. Like there's so much of this other stuff that
Yeah.
I can't really do anything about in my 12 hours of being there. So that really is what kind of was like the biggest light bulb moment for me recently, was just the was the when is enough going to be enough, and it had really nothing to do with me and everything to do with the patient. And I really had to separate myself from that, because I was taking that to heart for a long time, was seeing these patients over and over again and feeling like I wasn't doing my job as the nurse because they kept coming back, when was going so much deeper than that.
Yeah, I'd never heard it coined like that before. Frequent flyers in the ICU.
Yeah.
Yeah, that should be hopefully a never occurrence for people,
Mhm.
but multiple occurrences for people. Yeah, there is a point to when you uh you know, the things that you're doing or the things that are around you are what's causing you to be in the ICU.
Right. Right.
And you talked about this a little bit with yourself too. You said you had a coming to uh, you had a talk with yourself or a decision point in your life where you decided to make some changes and help yourself.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it was just some like real hard facts that I had to like come to grips with myself, because I kept thinking as I was going along, and this was like on multiple fronts. And that's why I talk about things holistically, is because
Yeah,
it wasn't just one part, it was so many other parts that were affecting my decision and my life. And one of them was, as I kept going on and on in my career and then on and on in my education, I kept thinking like, who the fuck's going to take me serious if I'm like this overweight nurse, on all these medications, trying to counsel people in the cardiac ICU about their own health? Like, who's going to take me seriously? Like, that was one of the things I had to tell myself. And then another part was that, we were just kind of talking off screen now, but I have three children, 17, 15, and 5. And when I got pregnant with my youngest, with my 5-year-old, I was 34 going to be 35. And so I was considered, advanced maternal age. So I was
yeah,
considered like
yeah,
an old mom. And so there was all these other precautions, and I was kind of in decent shape like when I first started the pregnancy, but as the pregnancy went on, I mean, I have a huge family history of obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes, so like I had all the cards stacked against me, and I was really
yeah,
trying to stay as healthy as I could. But towards the end of my pregnancy, I mean, I got preeclampsia. I ended up going into heart failure after I had my son, and I was on multiple blood pressure medications. I was on medications for anxiety, for depression, like just, and then they were wanting to add more and more medications
yeah.
on. I had gained the most weight I had ever gained in my life. I had weighed the most I had ever weighed in my life. And I was just not in a good, I was not in a good place. Like after that, I had a real reckoning with myself, and I thought about that, and how are people going to perceive me? How are people going to, take me seriously as a healthcare provider? Like, I got to get my shit together. And so I was able to make a lot of changes, but again, in a holistic way. Like, it was on so many fronts. I had to get very real with myself. And this is kind of how the whole spice thing came about, was I had to do all of that work. And I was able to lose 70 plus pounds and get off of all my blood pressure medications, off all of my anxiety and depression medications. I
Ooh,
reversed my heart failure. I mean, I got into the best shape of my life while I was finishing my doctorate. And most people, it's the entire opposite. But for me,
yeah.
it changed my entire life. And I changed the whole trajectory of my life during that time. So,
Awesome. I'll just say, first of all, congratulations. Awesome on doing that, because it is a life-changing event when you
mhm,
decide to do that. And I speak from experience. I was 60 pounds heavier 2 years ago,
yeah,
and I was on my way to more of the wrong kinds of medicine to have to take. And
right.
I can say my wife was well, they thought she was type 2 diabetic, but there's other things that cause LATA, late onset type 1 diabetes. So there's nothing we could do, but we both went in and decided to eat differently. And when
Mhm.
we started to do this, I also had started to read more about um, the importance of exercise and mental, and I don't even know, I don't even right to say it's holistic like meditation, reading, affirmations, whatever you want to call these kind of things that people talk about. But when you look at the entire person, it is life changing. There's no other way to say it. What it does for you. So as you were going through this process, and we're going to talk about spice in a minute because I love it. So what were some of the things that you realized?
Some of the things I realized, goodness, that I was really putting myself on the back burner for way too long. And I had really become, and I mean, I'm very blunt about all of this. Like, I had really become brainwashed by the whole healthcare system, organization, philosophy, whatever you want to call it, of like, you got to give, 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 give. And if you're not coming in, even if you're fucking dying, like, then you're not a real nurse. You don't care about your job. You don't care about anybody. And I had been pushing myself for so long, for so hard, or, doing
Mm-hmm.
that, like, just, and I was just in that mentality of just give, 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 give. And I had done another interview with another nurse actually just the other day. And sorry, my son. I was just doing an interview just the other day with another nurse, and we were talking about that, just, you know, that you just got to give and give and give. And it's like, who is going to take care of you? Who's going to take care of the nurse? Nobody's going to take care of you. You got to take care of yourself. And that was one of the hardest things that I had to come to grips with, was finally taking care of myself and not feeling guilty, not feeling bad about doing that at all, because knew I had to do that. So that was one of the biggest things. And I think one of the other things was really going back to my childhood and how I grew up, and the things that I was told about myself and how I needed to act, and what was considered healthy, and what I should look like, and bringing up a lot of these like generational, like growing up traumas, I guess you could call it. Growing up, I had to really face a lot of those and see how those were impacting my life in my current state. And how I was very much a people pleaser, and how I very much was, still going with those stories of like, oh, well, you're big boned, and, all of those stories that we're told growing up. And I had to really just rework all of those in my brain
Mm-hmm.
and get away from a lot of that. So getting very honest and very real with myself was really, really hard. It was really, really hard. But once I started doing that and not letting anybody else and not blaming anybody else,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it's not anybody else's fault, it was
yeah,
mine. So that was the other part.
yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome because the thing that I think that we forget when we feel guilty about taking care of ourselves is that if we don't, had you not chosen to change the direction,
Mhm.
you could have been here 10 years from now, very sick, very with a lot, taking a lot of medicine, and 20 years even worse, and 30 years even worse.
Oh, yeah.
And your kids wouldn't have you around. You wouldn't be
Yep.
able to enjoy your grandkids. You wouldn't be able to take, it's your family, the whole 9 yards. You're not there for everyone else either. So it's really not selfish at all to take care of yourself, because then you can show up for other people. Because you
Mhm.
talk about giving and wanting to give more at work, and sometimes being expected to. If you're not healthy, you can't give everything you could.
Right. Yeah.
And
There's there's no
it's just go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no. And and that's the thing that I've been saying more and more is, you only have to look at your family tree to know what's going to happen to you if you continue to do what you do.
Yep.
That's all you have to do. And that will show you exactly where you're going to end up. So that's the point that I got to. And I started looking at my mom, at my dad, my grandma, my grandpa, my cousins. Like, I started looking at everybody, and I knew If I didn't make a change, I have no doubt, Damon, I would be diabetic. I probably would have had a cardiac cath by now and all of this stuff because of my blood pressure, and my knees would be all jacked up because I was having like joint problems before. Like my knees would be all jacked up. I knew I wouldn't be able to do all the things that I do now if I would have kept going like that.
Yeah.
Who even knows if I would have been able to finish my doctorate because of with the demanding schedule that I had, if I would have even been
Hmm.
able to finish. Like, because I did get COVID. I got COVID while I was getting my doctorate. So who knows what that would have been like for me if I wouldn't have been taking care of myself. So many
Yeah.
variables, you know.
Yeah. And as you said too, just being able to be there and be active with your kids and do the things with your kids and the rest of your family that you want to do. And then like you said too, that just there's so many preventable diseases. And it just hurts me to see when people have to get to a point, or not have to get to a point, or don't get to the point to where they can make the changes they need to prevent it. Because I'm sure, like you said, with the frequent flyers in the ICU, and I love that term, a lot of people were there because they weren't making the changes and continue to go down the path and just let medicine try to keep them as healthy as they probably could be. Correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's it. People expect the medications to solve their problems. And that's so much of what is happening now. And that's like what I talk a lot about with diabetes. Like the pills and the insulin, they only like mask the symptoms. They don't do anything to get rid of the diabetes in the
Mm-hmm.
first place. And it's just we're just giving more and more medication to lower the blood pressure. Well, what's driving the high blood pressure? Oh, well, you're overweight. You eat a bunch of sodium. You eat a bunch of processed foods. Like those are the things that are driving your blood pressure. So why are we not fixing that instead of just upping your medication? Because that's all that we end up doing is more and more medication, upping the dose. Let's add something new. Let's add another thing. Like that's all that ends up happening when we got to be thinking the reverse way, and so many people are not. And that's like so much of that is it's lifestyle based, it's preventable, it's reversible, but people just need to be aware that it's an option for them because healthcare, they're in for disease treatment, not for disease prevention. That's what so much of it is.
Yeah, that's great to hear that from you. And so one of the things you said, I saw written about you, you said you're on a mission to transform healthcare, and I love that. Let's explain that a little bit of what you would like to see healthcare look like.
Yeah, well, all the things we've been talking about right now. And it's just so much of bringing awareness. And really, what I like to do is using video as the platform to do it because you can reach so many more people. And I know for myself, I'm Hispanic background, and for me growing up, I never heard of the terms like holistic, and I never heard of a lot of the different things for your health and for diabetes and blood pressure. I only knew what was in my little bubble of my family and my community. So now with technology, we are we're wide open to learn and receive all kinds of new information. So I feel like it's my duty, like I have to share this information so that people can learn about it, so that they can learn about diabetes, so that they can learn about high blood pressure, so they can learn about natural alternative ways to care for themselves so that they can break the odds, or defy the odds, break the cycle around all of that, because so much of that is generational and it's within families because everybody's stuck in their little bubble. They got to be exposed to other things. And so, really, I just leverage technology and I leverage connections and being connected to all kinds of different healthcare people all over to bring access to people who want to improve their lives in a more holistic way, in a more natural way.
Awesome. So okay, so I've got a whole bunch of questions here. So first of all, I'm going to, what do you think, as you've seen people and seen them make a transition and say they're going to do this, what do you think the hardest thing is for someone to do this? to
The hardest thing is, I think the hardest thing is staying consistent, and is like finding support, finding a community around it. Because if you, because like, this is another thing that I've been thinking about lately. Like, people talk a lot about willpower or like motivation. And it's like, people today do not have more willpower. They're not more motivated than
yeah.
people back in the day. Like, it's the same. But what we have access to now is so much more of a community aspect, especially with being online. You can connect with people from all over the world. So I think if you can connect with those people and find that and find good support, find people that vibe with you, then that's what's really going to lead to your success. That's what's really going to make you successful in doing this, because anybody can get started and you can get going into it, but you really need that support. You really need that community around you so that you're going to stay on track and stay successful with it. I think that's probably one of the biggest things.
And I think we just sat and listened about that. Just think about that for a minute. That was very good, because it is finding the right support, finding the right community to keep you consistent on these things.
Yes.
It is the hardest thing. I was reading a few weeks ago or a month ago or so about, it said we don't fall off the wagon, so to speak, with exercise and things like that. We just kind of start slowly drifting off course. So if we had a thing, we were going to eat 1,000 calories a day and get, instead of 4,000, we might eat 2,500 one day and go, oh, that's okay. It's just one day.
Mhm.
Next day, then it's 2,700 or whatever, and we're not watching it. Or we're going to exercise so many days a week, and then we don't exercise one day, and we just fall off course. But that support that you're talking about is what keeps people motivated. And I think, like you're saying, the access that you have to these different communities, online communities, in-person communities, whatever they are, to stay motivated and help each other stay consistent, I think is really a powerful tool.
Yeah, yeah. And the other way you can think about it too is, if you think about communicable diseases, right? You could even compare this to COVID. You can see different communicable diseases, right? They spread, they stay within certain communities. You can track them. Same thing happens with obesity and a lot of those other diseases. They are on track. You can see whole communities, whole clusters that are like that. That's because it's community based. It's all in that same group of people. So you can track that. And it all comes down to, who are you hanging around? Who are you around? You're going to catch whatever they got. And if these people got bad habits and bad things that they're doing, you're going to catch that. And more than likely, you're going to end up like that. And you can totally see that. It's totally with who you are around. Again, going back to that community, it's the same thing.
Yeah, I never thought of it like that, but you're right. If you're in a community that is eating poorly, any other bad habits you want to think about, and it's all around you every day, it's likely going to affect you too.
Yep.
So you created what you call Spice, and I love it. Let's talk about it a little bit. So let's explain that to us.
Sure, yeah. So SPICE is like, so in nursing, we have a head to toe assessment. And so I really consider SPICE my head to soul assessment. It's like my holistic, like triage little thing that I created. And it really is based on my experiences and my life growing up and the process that I had to go through to kind of come out on the other side to where I am now as a totally, different woman, totally different person now. And so all of the letters stand for something. Yes, it spells spice. Yes, it's nice. It works in all kinds of great phrases and sayings, but it does stand for something. And so the S stands for spirit, the P stands for physical, the I stands for insight, the C stands for career, and the E stands for emotion. And these are all the different like dimensions of health or wellness that we need to be really aware of if we want to care for ourselves in a holistic way. And it's the areas of my life that I identified that I did so much work in, and that I also noticed in other people that are areas that we can really tap into and make improvements on. And when you can kind of bring all those, into balance. I always talk about a lot of balance. Not everything's always perfect, but there's ways to create balance in your life. And that's how I look at it, and that's how I address it. And anytime I'm teaching or thinking about things, I'm always keeping that in mind when I do it. And so yeah, that's kind of how I came up with it. So
Yeah, because you talk about it, and you mentioned the words for the acronyms and spice. And when I saw it written, you said spirituality, it's our search for purpose and meaning.
mhm,
And and it is, it's really, I mean, we all desire that. And then the physical, how vital, energetic, and strong we are. And then insight, how we learn and grow our self-awareness and intuition. And then in career, how we create a professional life that reflects our calling and brings satisfaction.
mhm.
And emotion, how we feel inside and how broadly we can express, experience, and accept. I mean, you really have covered, like you said, head to soul
Yeah.
of the things that we should do. So as you went through these things, and
Mhm.
you go uh, Dr. Alexandria before, Dr. Alexandria after. What are some of the things that you learned about yourself in these areas that you had to come to terms with, or you thought, I want to change that?
Mm. Yeah, so many. So in the spirit part, I really had to I really had to become okay with what my purpose was, what I felt like my calling was, and not what other people expected me to do. Not what other people expected that Alex was going to do or should do. And once I really allowed myself to like be free in that and say, once I get my doctorate, I want to have my own practice, and this is how I want to take care of patients. This is how I see it. And this is what I want to do. And I want to do it my way. That was so freeing for me. And so that was a huge part of that spirituality part. And then the physical part, obvious with all the
Yeah,
physical changes,
yeah.
that I went through. And I think also too with the eye always ties into that. And I think the inner work, right? The insight, the inner work,
Hmm.
the being real with myself and not laying blame on other people, taking accountability. That was I think where I first started doing the work, was right there, was where I really first started doing the work.
Yeah.
And if I look at the C and I think about my career, I have always been very passionate about my career, and I've been very vocal, like all throughout my working years, about, empowering myself, but also empowering people around me to like live out their careers and not be afraid to ask for what they want, and to go and not be afraid to, be a mom who does work, who does go to school, who wants to do things with their life. Like don't shy away from that. I've always been very vocal about all of that. So that part came very easily and naturally to me. And the emotional part, I think the emotional part is always a work in progress. Always, 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 because, we're always facing new challenges in our lives. And, I had a lot of hard things to go through in my life. Like my dad passing away was a very pivotal part of my life, and my trajectory definitely was that. And he passed away almost 15 years ago, because my daughter had just turned 1 and
Hmm.
she just turned 15. So it's been about 15 years that he passed away. And I was right in the middle of, I had just started my LPN program. And so, there I am, a 20-some-year-old young mom with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, going to school full time, working. My dad had had a stroke, and because he had uncontrolled diabetes, uncontrolled blood pressure, he was overweight, not taking care of himself. He had a stroke, and his wife at that time, my parents had got divorced. So the woman that he was married to, once he ended up having that stroke and went into rehab, she decided she was going to divorce him and didn't want to take care of him anymore. So when he got out of rehab, he didn't have any place to go. So he ended up coming living with me. So like I said, there I was, 20 some years old,
Yeah.
trying to figure out my own life, and then having to become a caretaker to my dad. And he needed a lot of care. He was post stroke, a lot of care.
Yeah.
And then with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, going to school full time, working. So that was a huge thing. And he ended up passing away shortly after that because he had another stroke. He was just not in good shape. He had another stroke. He ended up passing away. Well, he ended up having a clot, went to his brain, went to the ICU, and we ended up having to take him off of life support, which another thing, you should not have to make that decision when you're 20 some years old.
Yeah.
But there I was having to go through that. So much of that emotional turmoil going through that. And it's like, life doesn't stop. Shit doesn't stop happening in your life. You have to figure out how to deal with it, and being emotionally strong and having resources, coping mechanisms. You have to have those in place. So the E is always evolving all the time.
Yeah. And your dad had to be pretty young if you were only in your 20s.
Yeah, he was in his like mid 50s. He was very young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I can see how coming through this is helped you decide to take a different path.
Yeah.
And because it is a decision. It is a decision.
Yeah.
So, and I'm going to go back through a couple things here that you said, because I think a lot of people in the the spirituality piece on this, you said one thing I think it's worth mentioning again, is people need to become okay with their calling, not what others expect them to do.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people get stuck in this because everyone around them expects them to do this or that. And it could even be their spouse, when it's not. And when it's something that they absolutely positively hate, and it's not something that they can ever be happy with or ever really feel fulfilled. I think that's something that a lot of people, the sooner you can feel all right with it and move down that path, it helps a lot of other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I could see that in you now from talking with you again, and that when you get that helps a lot. The second thing you said about insight is being real with ourselves and taking accountability for how things are.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy, is it?
No, it sucks.
Yeah, exactly. It just truly sucks. It truly
Yeah.
sucks, because you can look in the mirror and you go, I'm this way because a lot of the stuff I do. You take the world can do whatever it can, but at the end of the day, we control how we react and how we really are.
Yeah.
And that was awesome that you said that. Then you talked about career. And I really, what I got from it is, don't limit yourself.
Right.
There's no reason to. And I think that's another thing that people go, well, I can't do that. Well, why not?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you've broken down the why not,
Mm-hmm.
and just going and doing it. And that's awesome.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And the emotional part, when you talk about you talk about express, experience, and accept. And you said it several times during our conversation today. It's, life's going to happen. You're going to have to experience it. You're going to have to and accept it and move on. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. And that's great. So as you're helping people do this, what are some of the things that you love seeing when you're helping clients,
Mm-hmm.
learn the new way to live?
I really like it when well, obviously when they have wins, when they're successful at what they're
Yep.
doing, but I think it's just them seeing that it is possible for them. Like, it's not just, it's for her, it's for him, it's for you. Like, you can do it. You can do this. And I don't know if it's like jealousy that people have, or if it's like that FOMO, or I don't know what the term would be for it, but we look at other people's lives, and and that's another thing to work on also, right? Is looking at other people, comparing yourself, judgment, assuming things.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
And it's so not the case. You don't know what anybody's going through. You have no clue. And so just release all that and take the responsibility, be accountable for yourself. Don't worry about anybody else. That is so just huge for people to get over. And once they start to be successful and they start to see things happening for themselves, it's incredible. And it's also making sure that they know that there is support out there for them, like long-term support. And a lot of clients I have are like, well, what's next? What happens next? And it's like, okay, hold on, like we got to get through this part first, and then we'll get to the next part. But it's that long-term support that people really, really need, and they need to be okay with asking for help, with continuing to being, we're never going to be perfect. We're never going to have all the answers. I need help. I know I reach out to people. I know I need support in parts of my life. So there's nothing wrong with that. You have to be okay with asking for that, and receiving it is a whole nother thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it comes back again to what you said, is having that support, that community, those people around you, both when you're making the changes, but then just sustaining the change and living the life that you really, honestly, that you dream of.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so someone's listening today,
Mhm.
what would you tell them? What would you tell them? They're sitting there thinking, what this is wonderful, but it doesn't apply to me, or this is something for somebody else, or maybe they're looking for this kind of help. I don't know. What would you tell them?
I would say that if you're listening to, first thing I would say is, if you're listening to this, there's a reason you're listening to this, because I never believe in coincidence.
Boom.
Right? I never believe in coincidence. So if you are watching this, there is a reason. Maybe it's not today that this applies to you, but there is going to be a time where something that we have talked about applies to you.
Yeah.
And I'm here, you're here, we're all here. There are resources available for you, and you don't have to go it alone. You don't have to be confused. And I think that's be the biggest thing that I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't happen by chance. I love that.
Right.
I love that. So as you're moving along now, um, what are some of the things that you're trying to continue to develop with your clients, yourself, that you're going to take this to the next level?
Mm. I'm really wanting to make an impact with my practice on diabetes and high blood pressure. Like, that's really
Yeah.
where I'm wanting to make a mark at, especially in like women of color. That's really kind of like my focus,
Yeah.
and really where I'm wanting to make a huge difference in, um, because I know how it, I know for my family, it's obviously it's killed my dad. My mom has diabetes, my younger sister has diabetes, like pretty everybody in my family has diabetes, and it doesn't have to be that way. And I have hated seeing my own family suffer with this, and I want to be able to change that for other people, for their families, for young children that are growing up in these environments. I want to change
Hmm.
all of that for them. And I know it can only happen if I just continue to put myself out there and share my message and teach more about this and about what we can do for it. And it's not anything that's out of reach for people. We can all eat better, we can all be more active. It's very simple things, but it's the community aspect of it, and it's the awareness, and it's all of that. So that's really where I want to make my mark, is in that area for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Because two things is diabetes and high blood pressure are silent killers. Oftentimes people don't even know until it's too late and they're end up in the hospital.
Hmm.
And for the most part, they're very preventable,
Hmm.
or at least the effects or the problems from them are preventable.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's awesome. just thinking about this for a second because you got it's great talking to you because when you talk with people that have made a transformation in their lives and taken it to heart, and now you're helping other people, it's so inspiring to listen to you speak and and just learn from you. So yeah, I was going to ask a couple more questions, but I think that you've done an awesome job because because one of the things that I was thinking about it, and you said this a couple times. It starts when you're really little and you look at yourself and how you start, and because yeah, it does. It does. And once people can realize that the way I look at myself can change, the way I act and the things I do can change, and it's not going to it's going to take me doing those things obviously, but um
Mhm.
doing that. So have you seen, I was just going to ask you this, have you seen entire families make trans changes like this?
So my family, my family with my husband's lost over 100 pounds,
Uh-huh.
and both of my children are not overweight, because for me, I was an overweight child, and
Yep.
I said my kids are not going to be overweight and deal with all those problems. So my own family is an example, and that's how we live every day. And like there are rules in our house, and that's the thing that kills me too, is, you know, women especially use the excuse, moms use the excuse, well, I got my kids and my kids want to eat this and my kids want to do this. And I'm like, well, you're the mom. Like, what are you doing? Like you're the one buying the stuff and doing the things. You are the rule maker. Like you got to set the tone. And so, you know, our houses, I don't buy soda. I don't drink soda. I haven't drank soda in years and years and years. And so there's no soda in my house. But I got kids. So what? Like, I don't buy soda. They drink water.
Yeah.
They're fine. They can go to school and every now and then drink soda if that's what they want. But
Yeah.
at home, at the house, no. And we cook food, and they help me cook, and all my kids know how to cook. So I've set the tone for my family and how I want things to be. And unfortunately, like, I have to say, you know, my sister, for example, like her family, I don't think she's ever going to watch this video, but she you know, her and her family, you know, it's a very different situation there.
Yeah.
Very different, very different. And so it's, you know, we were both raised the same way, right? We both grew up in the same household, but the way that our lives are and the way that our families are two totally night and day.
Yeah.
So it's possible. It's just you have to decide. You have to decide. And so my family is an example. I unfortunately, and that's why I'm out here trying to do this, is I have not really seen other families take that type of control and do that when it has gotten severe like that. I have not seen that. So that's what I
Yeah.
want to make my mark, doing that, because it's possible.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it's one of the things that as you just walk around town, we talk about the obesity problem, and we
Yeah.
talk, and it seems like it gets younger and younger now.
Oh yeah.
And and it's I understand. I want to welcome everyone and be nice to everyone and not, body shaming. You don't want any of that because that's just worthless, right? That's just
Right.
wrong and worthless. Um, the health problems caused by it when you're 50 to 100 pounds overweight when you're 16 years old, or I can't even imagine what that's like when you're 45.
No, you can't ignore that fact. And you can't ignore the fact that there's like 10-year-old kids with atherosclerosis, right? Like hardening of their arteries and calcium and plaque building up. Like I remember being in nursing school and them specifically telling us, they said, why when we're learning about stroke and high blood pressure, why don't we have a pediatric chapter? on this? Why do we only have adults? Because literally for like everything else, there's like a pediatric section and then there's an adult section. Why don't we have that for kids? Because this is a lifestyle disease. You get this over time. You would only see this in adults because it's that type of plaque and high
Yeah.
cholesterol, triglycerides building up over time. So that's why we would only see that in adults. But now we're seeing that in children, kids 10 years old, hardening arteries, plaque, cholesterol, high triglycerides, all the shit that adults are dealing with, but kids are dealing with it now. And I mean, I don't want to think about any kids with that. I don't want to think about
Yeah.
kids with
Yeah. 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 Well, it's awesome, Alex, that you're out here helping people learn about this and you're teaching people
Thank
A,
you.
they can change,
Yes.
and B, showing them how,
Yes.
because it's making a difference.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you for stopping by today and talking with us here and sharing your message. People want to get a hold of you, talk to you about Spice. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Sure. Best thing is just send me a message. If you're connected with me on LinkedIn, send me a direct message. Say, hey, I saw you on Damon's show. I'd love to talk to you more. That's as easy as
Awesome.
it can be. I'm on all the social media platforms, so you can find me anywhere. But like I said, just send me a direct message. And if you want to check out my website, it's getyourspice.net is what it is. And you can check me out
Getyourspice.net.
getyourspice.net and you can check me out there. But yeah, that's the ways. And I'm
Awesome.
always down for making new connections and saying hello and meeting people. So
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks. I want to say thanks, Dr. Alexandria Rosa, for being here today. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing about Spice, your journey to finding holistic wellness,
yeah,
and how you're sharing and helping other women experience that and teaching them how to do it. I want to say thanks to Samantha and Samson and Muhammad and Karen for stopping by today and dropping the comments, and everyone else listening.
you know,
Hey, if you're listening today and you didn't hear it all, go back. Dr. Alex dropped some real nuggets at the beginning of this and throughout. These are things you can change. We don't have to deal with health because of our habits, and there's things we can change. We can change our lifestyles. We can change these things. Reach out to Dr. Alex if you want to talk about that some more. Thanks everyone for being here on the Faces of Business. Dr. Alex, if you can hang out just for a minute, we'll talk when we're
sure.
done here.